Have you ever like been trying to focus on something, like maybe you're in a meeting or reading a really interesting article or having a conversation, and suddenly you realize your mind has totally wandered off?
Yeah.
It's like there's this whole other world going on inside our heads. And today,
It's wild, right? Like,
yeah,
where did that come from?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we're going to dive deep into the neuroscience of that inner space,
Mm,
looking at what's known as the default mode network, or the DMN.
yeah.
It's basically like the brain's internal operating system.
Yeah.
What's active when we're not focused on the outside world.
So it's like the looking in system, right? Like you were saying.
Exactly.
And it's not just that it exists, it's really how profoundly it shapes our emotional landscape. And we're going to focus today on the intricate connection to depression. And I think it's going to be really fascinating to get a grounded perspective on something that's a very human experience. We all experience this kind of wandering mind. But to tie it into something like depression, I think is really fascinating.
Totally. And our guide in this is Dr. Steve Johnson, whose work offers a really compelling look at how the default mode network and depression are intertwined.
Yeah.
And our goal today is pretty straightforward. We want to really unpack the elements of this network, what its typical job is, how it goes about doing it, and crucially, what changes in its activity when depression is in the picture.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's dive in.
All right. So I think a really helpful way to start is to think of our brain activity as in terms of two like broad but interconnected systems.
Okay.
So there's what we can call the looking out system, and that's referred to as the task positive network. And this is the network that fires up when you're actively engaged with the external world, when you're concentrating on a specific task,
Yeah.
or you're paying close attention to something happening around you.
Right. That's when you're fully present in the moment,
Exactly.
focused on what's happening outside your own head.
Yeah.
And then there's the flip side, the looking in system, which is our focus today, the default mode network. And Dr. Johnson describes this as being deeply involved in our social and emotional lives and our sense of self as a continuous story unfolding over time.
Right. So it's not just random thoughts.
Yeah.
It's like tied into how we see ourselves and relate to others.
Yeah, it's not just daydreaming, it's really who we are.
Exactly. And so if we actually look at the anatomy of this network, we see a consistent set of brain regions that are working together. And it includes areas like the dorsal and ventral medial prefrontal cortex.
Okay.
Think of that as like the command center for our sense of self and social understanding,
Okay.
along with the posterior and retrosplenial cortex, the inferior parietal lobe, and the hippocampal formation, which of course is critical for memory and accessing memory.
Yeah.
So these are the key players in this looking-in system constantly interacting.
So we have these brain regions forming this default mode network. But what exactly is it doing when it's operating typically?
Yeah.
What kind of mental activities is it in charge of?
So when we're not actively tackling an external task, the default mode network becomes active, and it's involved in a surprisingly wide range of, crucial cognitive functions. And so Dr. Johnson highlights autobiographical memory. That's our ability to recall and reflect upon our personal past and, envisioning the future playing out, scenarios and possibilities in our minds. So really kind of looking at, our sense of self in time.
Did that make sense? When you're daydreaming or you're kind of spacing out, you're often thinking about things that happened or things that might happen.
Exactly, and it extends beyond our personal timeline. The DMN is also key for what we call theory of mind. Our capacity to understand other people have their own thoughts, beliefs, and feelings separate from our own.
Right.
So it's really important in social interactions, and it even contributes to moral decision making, those internal deliberations we have about what's right and wrong.
Wow.
And then it's heavily involved in our imaginative capacity. So, our ability to construct hypothetical situations, what if scenarios.
Right.
So it's, really deeply intertwined with social and ethical reasoning.
So it's not just the brain being lazy when we're not doing anything. It's actually,
It's got a job to do.
it has a very important job.
Yeah.
And it's foundational for our sense of agency as well.
Yeah.
That feeling that we are in control of our actions.
Right.
That we have a distinct self.
Exactly. So it includes our awareness of ourselves as agents who can make things happen, our subjective sense of who we are as individuals, and that ongoing narrative of our lives, the story we constantly tell ourselves about ourselves, our experiences, our place in the world.
It's so interesting that this network that's most active when we're not outwardly focused is crucial for our personal history and our understanding of others, and even our moral compass.
Right. It's kind of counterintuitive in a way.
Yeah, and Dr. Johnson points out that disruptions in this network are linked to different forms of psychopathology.
That's right. And this is where I think it gets particularly relevant, because when the activity within the default mode network becomes dysregulated,
Right.
it's been implicated in a whole spectrum of mental health conditions.
Yeah.
So this includes depression, of course, but anxiety disorders, ADHD, schizophrenia, autism spectrum disorder, and even borderline personality disorder.
Wow.
So it's this broad connection that suggests that how we process our inner world has a significant impact on our overall mental well-being.
So what kinds of aberrant patterns are we seeing in the default mode network in these conditions? What's going awry?
Yeah, so there's a couple key areas where researchers have observed differences. So one involves the transitions between that task negative state when the DMN is active and the task positive state when we're engaged with the outside world. And in some conditions, that switch it doesn't happen as smoothly as it typically would.
Yeah.
It's like, imagine you're trying to shift gears in a car and it's really jerky or it gets stuck. It's kind of like that in the brain.
So it's like when somebody is really caught up in their own thoughts and they can't even focus on what's going on externally.
Exactly. And another common pattern is reduced functional connectivity within the default mode network itself. So if you think of the different parts of the DMN as members of a team, reduced functional connectivity is like they're having trouble communicating with each other and coordinating their efforts.
So the different regions of this looking-in system aren't communicating and working together as they should.
Exactly. And there can also be alterations in that reciprocal relationship that we talked about, that dynamic interplay between the DMN and the task positive network, this constant kind of give and take that's vital for adapting to different demands.
Right.
And if there's disruptions in that, it can lead to, either being overly active or underactive in relation to what's happening externally.
Okay.
And then finally, research has identified differences in the activation of specific subsystems within the DMN that correlate with particular cognitive functions. So it suggests that certain aspects of our internal processing might be more affected than others, depending on the condition.
So it's a much more nuanced picture than just an on-off switch.
Yeah, exactly. It's really complex.
Yeah.
Lots of different moving parts.
And Dr. Johnson refers to the default mode network as the wandering mind, which really captures that feeling.
It does.
We talked about it at the beginning.
Yeah, it's a really good description, because when our attention isn't directed outwards, our thoughts naturally tend to drift and meander. They move from one thing to another, often without a specific direction. And the default mode network is largely responsible for this self-referential inner monologue that most of us experience.
Right.
It's that internal voice, that, continuous stream of thoughts, reflections, internal commentary that's always kind of running in the background.
The chatter that we don't always realize is happening.
Exactly. And so Dr. Johnson emphasizes that this wandering mind, this, natural shifting between the DMN and the task-positive network, it's totally normal.
Right.
And it's even beneficial. It's when the default mode network becomes overactive and gets stuck in certain patterns that problems can emerge, particularly in the context of the mental health conditions that we've been talking about.
And this brings us to the specific connection with depression. So how does the default mode network tend to behave differently in someone experiencing depression?
So one of the really significant things here is that in depression, the brain often exhibits a heightened and persistent focus on that internal monologue.
Okay.
But instead of being a free-flowing and neutral stream of thoughts, this monologue tends to draw really heavily from negative internal sources. So this might include recalling unrelated negative memories, dwelling on worries about the future, and engaging in harsh, self-critical thoughts. It's almost like, the brain's internal radio station is constantly broadcasting negative news.
That sounds so exhausting.
Yeah, it's really draining. And crucially, individuals experiencing depression often find it extremely challenging to decrease this overactivity of the DMN, even when they're trying to engage in normal cognitive activities.
Oh, wow.
So they might be attempting to focus on a conversation, read a book or complete a task. But this disruptive inner dialogue is constantly present, pulling their attention back to negative self-focused thoughts. It's like trying to listen to someone speak while there's a loud negative commentary playing in your own head.
Yeah, it's like their brain gets caught in this negative loop, and it's so hard to be present or think positively about anything going on externally.
Exactly. And this persistent overactivity of the DMN often fuels this phenomenon of rumination,
Right.
which Dr. Johnson highlights as a really central aspect of depression. And rumination is essentially that inability to disengage from that negative inner monologue, that repetitive cycle of going over and over the same negative thoughts, worries, feelings without finding any resolution.
Yeah, I think that really captures the essence of feeling trapped in your own head when you're struggling with depression.
It does, and it's really debilitating. And this rumination has a profound impact on autobiographical memory because this internal negative dialogue isn't getting the corrective feedback from the external world. It's just this repetitive internal processing. Right. So the way memories are recalled and organized can become disorganized and distorted, often with a really strong bias towards negative past experiences.
Okay.
So think of your memories like a filing cabinet.
Yeah.
Rumination is like constantly pulling out the negative files, looking at them over and over again, letting them overshadow all the positive ones, and eventually distorting the entire system.
That's a great way to think about it.
Right. So the narrative of the self, that ongoing story we tell ourselves, becomes increasingly dominated by these negative ruminations, and that internal negative world starts to feel more real than anything else.
So more real than their actual external world.
Exactly. And over time, this can lead to a situation where that negative inner world, fueled by the overactive DMN and persistent rumination, it can feel more real and compelling to the individual than the positive aspects of their external reality. And so this growing detachment from the positive aspects of the outside world is a significant and often debilitating feature of depression.
And that really highlights why interventions like behavioral activation can be so helpful, because you're actively encouraging people to have positive experiences in the external world.
Right.
So you're helping to interrupt that internal negative feedback loop.
Exactly. That's precisely the mechanism. So by increasing engagement with the outside world and fostering positive experiences, behavioral activation aims to provide new positive information that can challenge those really entrenched negative internal narratives and over time, help regulate that overactivity of the default mode network.
Wow.
So it's really about re-engaging with the world to change the internal dialogue.
It's fascinating to see how this neurological understanding aligns with those therapeutic approaches.
Yeah, I think it's really neat.
And Dr. Johnson also touches on how this constant negative self-talk, driven by the DMN, can contribute to those harsh, pervasive negative self-ratings
Yes.
that are seen in individuals with depression.
Yeah, so that relentless rumination on negative thoughts, it can really erode an individual's sense of self-worth and contribute to the development of those global negative self-assessments. Things like, I'm a failure, I'm defective, I'm worthless, undeserving, I'm no good, utterly incompetent, unworthy.
Right.
These are the kinds of deeply ingrained negative beliefs that are often a central focus in therapies like REBT and CBT.
Yeah.
And so understanding the DMN's role provides a neurological foundation for how these negative self-perceptions develop and persist.
It's like the brain's inner critic gets amplified and never shuts off.
Yeah, it's really hard to escape that.
And it's really interesting, Dr. Johnson anticipates further discussion on the DMN's potential role in borderline personality disorder.
Yeah.
So suggesting that this network is likely a key player in the underlying mechanisms of a variety of complex mental health conditions.
Yeah, there's a lot more research to be done there.
Yeah, it's definitely something to keep an eye out for in a future deep dive.
For sure.
So let's bring it all together. The default mode network, this seemingly quiet but incredibly active part of our brain, is fundamental to our internal thoughts, our sense of self as a continuous story, a range of vital cognitive functions when it's working the way it should. However, when it becomes overactive, particularly in the context of depression, it can trap individuals in a negative inner world, characterized by relentless rumination, distorting their personal memories and contributing to deeply damaging beliefs about themselves.
And so, gaining an understanding of the DMN offers a really valuable neurological lens through which to view these often intensely personal and internal experiences. It helps us appreciate how these seemingly abstract thoughts and feelings have a tangible basis in brain activity and how disruptions in this activity can have such a profound impact on our overall mental well-being.
So for you, the listener, now that you have a deeper understanding of this silent operator within your brain and its connection to our inner narrative, how might this knowledge influence how you perceive your own moments of mind wandering?
Right.
Or perhaps how you consider the experiences of those around you who might be struggling with their mental health?
Yeah.
It really prompts us to think about the balance between our internal and external worlds
That's a really good point.
and how they're constantly interacting and shaping each other.
Yeah, for sure.